Good morning. You can do better than that. Good morning. All right, that's a little bit better. Apparently they want me to use two today. I'm going to set one over here. My fancy handy-dandy lapel mic is still not working. It's on the fritz. We're going to have to get a new one. I feel like I'm trapped when I have to do that, like there's a shackle on my legs. We did have I think it was Tim. I don't know where's Tim. Tim is going to perhaps make a harness to be able to hold it over me like a carrot and a horse. And but we also thought we would put a GoPro camera on so that we would pipe that to the YouTube Live. Everybody'd see you and see better looking people than me, and see how many of you are still awake. But this is the second week of our brand new series, and our new series is called Fences. Today we're going to talk about white picket fences. White picket fences, or as I like to say, beautiful boundaries. But last week, in the first week of this series, we discussed how some fences can actually be confusing. Some fences that we put up or that we see can actually be confusing. They don't always mean what they say. Now, some fences start off sounding like a good idea, but then something weird happens, okay? And even the best fences that we put up can become something different completely. And last week we talked about this issue where we have in our lives these pencil fences, and we talked about some ink fences, and we even kind of discussed at a deeper level, some blood fences. And I would have to say that I myself, I have a lot of pencil fences in my life. Pencil fences in my life that are really helpful things, but I also have a bunch of ink ones as well. And it's not so much that like the blood fences, the pencil fences, the ink fences, it's not so much that I think that we should have just one kind of fence, but I think that we need to do a better job of teaching each other, and especially our young people, the difference between these different kinds of fences. People find way too many reasons to be divided. I hate that, and especially in our faith. This is supposed to be the most important thing in our lives, and we seem to gravitate towards those issues that just divide people, that put wedges in between people. Why don't we do a better job of finding the things that we can agree upon, build a relationship off of that, and then discuss and grow in those other types of fences? And last week, there were several of you that actually came and shared stories with me because we talked about the way it used to be. And the one person actually shared a story that stood out in my mind because she said that she grew up in one of those homes that we discussed last week, okay? And it was in a home where every single fence was a blood fence. Every fence was something to die over, my way or the highway. Everything was a blood fence. And the expectation for her was that you couldn't even be a Christian unless you bought into everything. All right? It was all or nothing. And the person actually said it this way. The first time that she ever wanted to stay the night at a girlfriend's house, her mother had come home that evening. And she was wearing jewelry and makeup, right? And she said that when she went home, she actually said to her own mother that she thought her girlfriend's mom was a prostitute. Because she grew up thinking and believing and listening to these things that only prostitutes wore jewelry and makeup. And so that she only knew what she was taught. And some fences seem like good things, and we try to put these fences up around people, but often these fences, they don't necessarily just help us. They can help the family, but they can also hurt us or hurt the family. They can give wrong perspectives. And all of a sudden, some weird things can happen with these things that we think might be harmless. And I'm going to say again, fences can be good, and they can help, absolutely. But they can also be bad, and they can end up very destructive. And I'm going to say that each message in this series is really going to tie into the other. And if you missed last week, I would encourage you to jump online, either crossconnectchurch.com for the website, the videos are on there, or even on the YouTube page. because we're going to slowly unpack some things, and we're going to build off of each one of these messages, and we might go in directions that you're not necessarily anticipating. So today I want to talk to you about a very specific kind of fence, okay? And we talked about, or we said that that was white picket fences. And I think we have a picture of a white picket fence, right? White picket fence. See, it's pretty, right? It's a beautiful boundary. And these kind of fences are fences that might look good, and they absolutely serve a purpose, and they help us, and sometimes they can keep us safe and far from destruction. But as we're thinking about these fences, I'm going to show you some other images, and I want you to think about these things as we talk about them. But let's look at this first image. What do you think when you see this? Do you think, oh, so helpful? No, probably not, right? Right. Well, how about this next picture? What do you think when you see, do you think, look at that kid helping out so early, getting involved, pulling his own weight, really, right? Helping. Well, what about this one? This next one's my favorite. I am all for, I have a gym, I push people. I'm all for kids exercising, but this might be a little too early. But I'm pretty sure she's going to do a pull-up, The first fence I want to talk about today is the fence that we put around a baby, and we list that as maturity. This is a maturity fence. And again, I think that we see these things and we see these fences as really important, and hopefully you'll see some of these things as actually being critical. Because if you actually think any of those earlier pictures were okay, then I want you to stick around, and I need to pray for you after the service, all right? In contrast to the first set of pictures, I'm going to show you a couple more now. And when we see these pictures, and this is the first one, you probably don't say, I can't believe those parents treat their kid like that. Trapping them in that prison, that little tiny prison, not letting them get to experience life. Or this next picture, you probably don't think that they're preventing their son from accessing the rest of the home, right? You're probably not upset for the child. Because these fences tend to make a lot of sense. These fences in our mind tend to make a lot of sense. And I want to turn to the book of Hebrews. The first 4 verses that we're going to look at are actually this warning against falling away. And basically what Paul is saying, and Paul is the author of Hebrews, or at least that's the common thought, is that he is the author of Hebrews. He's saying that they're not where they should be, and they're actually, because of that, in a very dangerous place. And he uses the metaphor of an infant, and you'll get this. And listen to the word in Hebrews 5:11 through 14. And it starts out, we have much to say about this, but it is hard to explain because you are slow to learn. That's kind of rough. In fact, though by this time you ought to be teachers, you need someone to teach you the elementary truths of God's word all over again. And this is pretty straightforward talk, isn't it? He's saying that he just comes flat out and says you're slow to learn. In fact, you ought to be teachers, but you need people to walk you through the most basic of things. And then he goes on to say you need milk, not solid food. And the text continues, anyone who lives on milk, being still an infant, is not acquainted with the teaching about righteousness. But solid food is for the mature, who by constant use have trained themselves to distinguish good from evil. And I want you to keep in mind this word distinguish, because we're going to unpack that a little bit later on. But as we think about this, we need to make a few observations here based off of this text and what we're talking about. Number one, there's a difference between food of an infant and food for an adult. Is there not? There's a difference. There's a difference, right? All right, I was just checking. That's the GoPro. We just caught, 80 people asleep. And certainly there's a difference between milk and solid food. That's why he said it, right? There's a difference, a distinct gap. But the next thing is, as an adult, our ability to perceive and distinguish things is different from that of a child's, right? Or shouldn't it be? Anyone having trouble with that, maybe? Anyone? No hands on that one. Okay. But when we put a gate up for a kid, when we put that crib wall up, when we put that gate at the top of the stairs, it's because when we walk up the stairs, we know those are stairs. We know that those stairs can be useful. They serve a purpose. But we also know that they can be dangerous. A kid doesn't know that. A child sees the same thing. A child sees these stairs, and then it's whoop, boom, boom, boom. It's a big house. No, a child doesn't see these things coming, right? Those stairs at Joe and Lana's house. A child doesn't rationalize those things in the same way as an adult does. We should be at a different level, and we should be held to a higher standard. And there's this ability for us that is completely different, and we really do not or should not expect a kid to get it. And really that's on many levels. We'll talk about that with infants today and little kids, but we could even unpack that into teenagers. I've had talks with some wonderful, wonderful families where we're having these epiphanies together that, yes, we want our teenagers to grow and learn and be mature. But sometimes we forget that they're still kids. And we expect things from them that are not fair for them. And in that, we're setting them up for failure. It's okay to grow and learn and teach. But we have to know the difference. We have to analyze what we're talking about, who we're talking about, and the realistic ability. And this reminds me of a story I heard. I read this in an article, and it was really cute. He said that there's this kid who saw his dad working outside on a hot summer's day, and it was a small child, so he couldn't quite reach many things. And so this kid, having the heart only a kid could have, because let's face it, children are much more compassionate than we ever are. He looked out and wanted to help his dad. But he wasn't tall enough to reach the cupboard, but he could get his hands into the sink. And so he grabbed, with his dirty little kid hands, a dirty glass out of the sink, right? And so he couldn't quite turn the cold water on with the faucet, so he just filled it up with lukewarm water. And you see where this is going, right? So he manages to get his dirty little hands with his dirty glass that's now filled with lukewarm water, and he runs out, it's hot outside, and gives this to his dad, and he's so proud he's doing this for his dad. When the father saw what this kid did, and he knew that this kid absolutely wanted to do and actually did his very best in bringing this glass, his dad received it with thankfulness and drank the glass of water. As I was even just walking back through that, it gave me goosebumps to think that the father saw what was in the kid's heart, didn't pay attention to the other stuff. Now, I would argue he should have said, "Look, it's Snoopy," and tossed it out. But he didn't get mad. He understood that this kid brought its very best to him. And now, if you, as an adult, I'm going to ask you this. If you're visiting your parents, if you leave here today and go visit your parents, and you did the same thing, would your parent receive that? Probably not. If there was a way to ground you at this age, they probably would. Because you're expected to know better. Your dad, your parents would expect more from you. Our expectations of the ability of infants is completely different than that of what we expect from adults. And that's the way it should be, right? Right? All right. We know this stuff intuitively, but we're going to play a game. And I want you to help me out here, okay? I'm going to show you some different foods. And all together, I want you to help me to understand and discern whether this is the food for an infant or food for an adult, okay? Are you ready to play this game? Are you ready? Here's the first slide. Infant. Now, I have to add this, though. Isn't it funny how they always put like some sort of fluffy title? Tender young green beans. Yummy. Tender young green. Those do not look like tender young green beans to me, but what do I know? Here's the next one. Infant or adult? Adult. Thank goodness, right? Now, I'm going to open myself up to ridicule. I'm going to tell you a true story. True story. When I was around 9 or 10, my stepfather took me and my stepbrother, or half-brother, to a restaurant, and this was a treat. We grew up poor. This was a treat. But he took me to a place that had this all-you-can-eat peel and shrimp. Now, I'm pretty sure it was like garage sale, all-you-can-eat shrimp, but it was all-you-can-eat peel and eat shrimp. And he bet me that I couldn't eat more than him. Now, remember, he didn't like me, right? I had never eaten peel and eat shrimp before. I didn't know about the peel part. But I am stubborn. And I ate as much as I possibly could without ever peeling any of those. So my stepdad, now in tremendous pain from laughing at me, finally filled me in and showed me what I was supposed to do. But that was my introduction to peel and eat shrimp. But here's the next one. Infant or adult? Infant. Okay, you're getting good at this. And I have to say, for this next one, can we put this up? Adult? I'm not much of a steak guy, but that looks good. And well, I'm not much of a steak guy because now that I know how to eat peel and eat shrimp, I really like seafood. But Paul, going back to our text, Paul is revealing something that's potentially offensive, but that we all know to be true. It's not just babies and infants who lack maturity. It's not just children who lack maturity in some cases, right? Okay. We're going to have a system here, and I'm going to break another mic. Does anyone else want to admit that they might lack just a little bit of maturity in at least maybe one area of your lives? One area that we've got some growing to do? Paul says here in this text that they should actually be teachers by now. And what's missing, because we don't have time to read the whole book of Hebrews, is he's actually come to them several times. He's coming to them again. He's coming back and saying, I've already taught you this stuff. We've discussed it. We've had lessons on it. You should be teachers by now. But now you're like children, like infants. You're still needing to drink milk. And they just didn't get it. So much so that they had to be helped and taught all over again about the most basic of things. And this is a problem. But there's always that issue in all of us that we end up with that one thing that pulls us far, far away from God and far away from where we should be. And it's that little issue. We can have so many things in our lives in a row, pretty proud of it, patting ourselves on the back. But we can have that one thing, that one dirty little secret in the closet. We can have that one thing that we just haven't had the willpower to tackle. And it's just that one thing that pulls us farther and farther away from where we should be. Every single person in here, including myself, we can be so immature when it comes to some things. We can be immature. We can be defensive. We're riddled with the ability to make excuses for things. And like babies, sometimes we need gates to keep us from falling down the stairs. But when it comes to people, I got to say that's the same thing. You may have heard something like this. Maybe you've said this yourself. It's probably not good for me to hang out with that person. Has anyone ever heard that? Has anyone ever said that? Maybe to one of your teenagers. It's probably not good for you to hang out with that person. I've even said that. I've had it said to me. But the thing is that we don't get, the thing that we don't process all the time is that sometimes we say that because we think we're good and they're bad. We think we can't hang around them because we're so good and they're so bad. And sometimes we have to actually be honest and say, it's not about them. It's not about whether or not they are good or bad. It has more to do with our lack of maturity. You know, that being a follower, not a leader. Sometimes we can't handle being around some of those people basically because of us, not because of them. And this is even true in Christian circles. Take the books from the Bible. For many people, the authorship of these books can be up to question. There are some things that we don't know for sure. But if you grew up with a doctrine that said this was it, that this was the fence, this was the blood fence, it had to be Paul, it had to be Timothy, it had to be whoever. If you grew up saying that this was it, there's no argument, no discussion on things that we don't know always for the absolute truth, if you grew up with that being a blood issue, then you can understand how good things, doctrinal things, can become things that are very destructive in conversation, that divide people, that push wedges in between people. And if we lack that maturity, that whole system, that whole issue, that whole part of us can throw us into a tailspin. And I just think that these are interesting things. We have these fences around babies, and we would never, ever, ever, ever think of letting a baby run wild through the house. Or at least if you come over to my house, please never, never, ever let your baby run wild through the house. I remember Tim and Becca, and they had 5 children. We think they had many more, but they had 5 children. And I remember the day we were like, where's Mackie? And we looked over, and he had the shock remote to Titus, our 130-some pound Doberman. And that was a day, and you could see Titus looking at little Mackie. No. We put these fences up for a reason. We expect kids to get into mischief, and we put these fences up. And another fence I think that we'll all agree upon is this: the fence around a lion. Again, this is a maturity thing. The fence around a lion. The thinking goes that if we're mature, and because of that lack of maturity, we need fences, okay? And we've established that. But sometimes we take it a step further. Sometimes we're fooled into thinking as we get stronger, as we grow, as we get more mature, then I'm not going to need those fences anymore. I can pretty much handle anything. Not just handle more things, but I can handle anything and everything that you could send against me or the enemy could put against me. And we have this tendency that we like to think that somehow, because we've opened our Bible more than twice this week, that we've become super Christians and we can handle anything. Devil can't touch us. I'm that far in my faith. Can't be tempted, can't fail, can't make a mistake, can't make a misstep. We become super Christians, and we get fancy, and instead of leaning into all the things that got us to this place of strength in the first place, leaning into the fences, leaning into the better habits, leaning into the cautious observation, instead of leaning into those things, we get fancy and walk away from it. And I want you to know this: almost every catastrophic failure that I've ever had in my life, and almost every catastrophic failure that I've had in my spiritual walk, began with this statement: I'd never fail in that area. When you get so cocky as to say that, you are testing and tempting the enemy to come at you with both barrels. Do not be so high in yourself to think that you can't fall. We are flesh and blood. We all need help. We all need fences. We all need each other. And in those situations, they might be in something that I didn't even feel tempted about. I didn't feel a tendency towards whatever it was. But as soon as I said that, the next thing you know, boof. I'm making a misstep, and I'm having to apologize somewhere to someone. But instead of saying that, we should say something like this. There, but for the grace of God, I go. There, but for the grace of God, I go. It is only in God's power that I go. But by His grace that I would be successful. But by His grace that I would come out unscathed. But by His grace I would fight off that temptation. But by His grace I would give grace to my brothers and sisters. But by His grace, we are all susceptible to anything. If we're ever trusting in any things, any substantive thing, any person other than Jesus, we're in danger because He is the only one who can get us through. And so here's the next picture. This seems like a good idea. Here's the next picture, and cue. That seems like a good idea, doesn't it? Now, is there anyone here that thinks, oh, what a pretty kitty? Wouldn't it be much nicer if we maybe took the fence down a little bit so I could pet the kitty? No? Or maybe even take the fence away completely because we're that mature, we're that confident in our abilities. Hello, kitty. No, that would be crazy. That fence is there for a good reason. Lions fall into an interesting category. Lions fall into a category called apex predator. And if you don't know what an apex predator is, let me tell you what that simply means. Lion eats everything. Nothing eats lion. Lion eats everything. And so if you hang around with lion long enough, you're going to be eaten. That's just the way this works. We all need these fences, no matter how mature we think we've gotten in these areas. We can't handle that, and we certainly can't handle it alone. If we're not connected to God, when it comes to this kind of stuff, we're done. We're through, finito. As we see in 1 Corinthians 10:13. No temptation has seized you except what is common to man, and God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. But when you are tempted, He will also provide a way out so that you can stand up under it. Now, we tend to like this passage, and I've heard this passage so many times, but the reason we like this passage is we tend to key in on that first part. We key in on the first part of that scripture verse, and that says, God won't let me be tempted beyond what I can bear. We love this, don't we? We can take faith and confidence in God won't tempt me beyond what I can bear. But there's a problem with that. There's a problem that gets overlooked. God's not going to let you get tempted beyond what you can bear. Absolute truth. I heard a but. But you are going to let yourself be tempted beyond what you can bear, aren't you? God's not going to let you be tempted beyond what you can bear, but you will put yourself in situations with more than you can bear, even when you know you shouldn't, won't you? I will. Because we're human, because we're flawed. We all do this all the time. We make decisions in these situations, and we try to pet the lion. We do this. And the power of this text is, though, that God provides a way out. But then we have to, again, unpack that. God's going to provide a way out, but we have to take it. When God opens that door for escape on that situation, you actually have to walk through it. That's another area that we struggle. God is there for us. Every single major misstep of your life, if you traced it back, you'll see an opportunity, a way out, an interruption, a point where God gave you this opportunity to walk away, to abort that mission. And we walk right by it. I was hoping for a door or something in yellow. It wasn't convenient. It wasn't what we wanted. I had a specific prayer, God. You got to give me this one thing. And we do this all the time. But when it comes to temptation and sin, the Bible tells us not only to take God's way out, but the Bible actually tells us to flee. Flee from temptation, from sexual immorality, flee from sin. The imperative thing here is not to stand firm. It's to run away. We need that fence around the lion. People apply here as well. I'm going to tell you that. It really is the truth. It doesn't matter how strong you are. It doesn't matter how mature you are in your faith. Some people are going to be those lions in your life. Those are the lions that know where your buttons are, and they're going to push them. They're going to take you to a place, spiritually, emotionally, relationally, that is far, far, far away from God. And you need to put a fence up to keep them from you or to keep you from them, however you want to think about that. But both of the fences that we talked about today are all about maturity. And we have to have that maturity to discern these things. We need to know the areas in our own lives which we lack that maturity. And so for us, we put up this fence that maybe that's a little bit smaller, but so that we can mature and grow. And then as we mature and grow, we can expand it. We can make these incremental steps. Doesn't that sound like it makes a lot more sense than just removing the fence and meeting that lion face to face? We also need to know that even as we mature, there are going to be things in your life, areas of your life, that you're just not strong enough to endure. There are going to be areas in your life that none of us are strong enough to endure. Because that lion, that tiger, whatever, is just going to wipe us out. We can't handle some things. And I want to show you this last picture. And it's a picture of a lion. And that is what the enemy wants to do to us, our faith, our lives, our family. The blood in its mouth, this lion's obviously been killing stuff. 1 Peter 5:8, and there's not a slide for this. I just want to read it to you. Says, be self-controlled and alert. Your enemy, the devil, prowls like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour. The devil wants to destroy the work of God in every single one of our lives. And if you've come here today, you're definitely in the crosshairs. The devil is alive and well attacking churches. If he can create chaos here, it's not so hard to do out there. All of us need to keep this in the back of our heads. And the question we have to ask is very simple. Are you going to let him attack you? Are you going to let him distract you? Are you going to let him, the devil, trick you into taking those fences down and petting the lion? Or are you going to run to Jesus, the only one who reigns forever? Next week, we're going to go into a completely different direction, and we're going to be blowing up some fences, and it's going to be awesome. And I hope you come back and walk through that with us. But these two fences that we talked about today in particular are fences where we sometimes lack maturity. Or at the very least, our immaturity leads to pride, to a point where we think we can handle anything. We think we can handle everything. We think that these fences keep us from God. But these fences that we're talking about today are God. Because Jesus wants to help us mature. Jesus is that fence that was put around our lives. But we have to go to him. We have to try to experience him in new ways. Because he wants to protect us. He absolutely wants to empower our lives. And so before we pray together, I just want to ask you, what kind of fences do you need to build in your life? What kind of fences do you need to build to keep you from falling on your face or getting bit? We need to be honest with ourselves. I can't build that for you. I can help you build, but I can't build that for you. We desperately need to seek this because sometimes we want to avoid any type of thinking about this in any ways. We don't want to think that we're immature in areas of our lives because that's humbling. Most of us raised our hands and admitted that we lack in some area, that there's something in their life dredging this immaturity. And so let's build some fences together and help each other get stronger.